Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today has always been drawn to good storytelling, especially historical novels and Broadway musicals. While motherhood, hospital administration, and community volunteering were all rewarding, none completely fulfilled her creative longings. She's a graduate of Rutgers University and Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health. And when not writing, reading, or traveling, she can be found working in her ever-expanding vegetable garden. The Convention of Wives, which will be published September 20th, 2022, which is next week, is her first novel. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Debra Green.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Debra, our opening question is always, so what took you so long to write a book?
Always a great question. You learn so much about a person's life. I spent many years raising our three wonderful children and took a break from my hospital administration track to do that. And then went back to work after our youngest started high school. And that time that I spent professionally really limited the time I had available to pursue anything outside of that. So between still mothering, even though they were in high school and beginning college, and working, there was very little time for me to pursue anything such as writing a novel. But I always dabbled. I dabbled in writing.
Well, once you wrote the book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to use a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
At the beginning, I did search for an agent, and I made the mistakes that new authors often do and sent out many, many query letters at once and got many rejections and got a little disheartened. And at that point, I heard about my publisher, She Writes Press, which is a hybrid publisher. And I thought I would take a chance. I knew that being accepted was unlikely, but I figured this was the next step. And so that's what I did. And I was very pleasantly surprised to hear from them, a little bit shocked. And that was it. And we took off from there.
Well, She Writes is very well respected in the publishing world, and they certainly create a wonderful community of women writers.
Yes, they do. I have found my sisters. I certainly have a local writing class that I participate in, and I have a local writing group that I'm a part of. But there is something different about going through the actual publishing of a book. It is a very different journey, and it's been wonderful to have these women share that with me.
What was your inspiration for this book?
The inspiration really comes from my own experience being married to a surgical resident and then a practicing physician, and some of the frustrations I had being a young mother and going through that experience, the loneliness and the challenge of being independent in sometimes raising our children when my husband was not really around that much, and trying to find a way through that, a positive way through that.
Did real people inspire any of your characters?
They did. I think any author takes what they know, takes the people they know, the experiences they have, and folds them into their writing. And perhaps this novel, to some degree, is autobiographical, but to a large degree, it's not. These are made up characters with pieces of people that I know. From physicians I've met along the way to many physicians' wives I've become friendly with and known, and their stories. And I hope I've reflected some of what they have dealt with and some of the answers they've found and some of the questions they still have about how to deal with this somewhat unique experience.
What does the title mean?
The title is Double Entendre. Because the main characters, Dina and Julia, actually meet at a convention, as do many doctors' wives. You know, we spend a lot of time during these conferences taking care of ourselves in a way, having a moment to breathe, be away from our families, and we tend to meet at these conventions and get to know each other. So the book was written about two women who actually meet at a surgical conference. And it also is about the coming together of women and the importance of that, the importance of female friendship, the importance of female support, regardless of experience. You know, I'm writing about two surgeons' wives. I am sure there are many parallel stories about policemen's wives and other similar experiences where a husband's career is demanding and serving of the public. And I think there would be many things that would be shared.
Can you describe the editing process that you chose?
The editing was segmented in some way. The beginning of the editing actually occurred in a writing class that I signed up for, where I got feedback not only from my writing teacher, but also from my classmates, and learned a lot along the way. So there was several years of, I would say, workshopping this novel. And at that point, I felt that when I felt I had something that was somewhat complete, I actually hired a developmental editor, Brenda Copeland, who was wonderful, and spent about a year and a half with her going back and forth, mostly battling about how much of the historical portion of the novel to include. She wanted less, I wanted more. I wound up cutting about 4 or 5 chapters of the historical. And just to take that a little further, it was important for me that the historical remained, because I felt that one of the themes, the tenets of the book, was the importance history plays in in what happens to people in the present day. That our history is enfolded in who we are, both psychologically, traditionally, genetically, all of it comes to play. And so for me, cutting the historical was almost painful, because I just thought it was very germane to the book.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the book and then read a few paragraphs for us to hear your tone and voice in the book.
Sure. The story is about Dina and Julia, who, as I said, meet at a surgical conference. They're young. They both have infants and new marriages, and are struggling, and they share their struggles with their husbands' schedules and with their loss of identity along the way. And the book plays out over the 30-year friendship of these two women, and shows different aspects of their marriages and changes in the friendship. And it also flashes back historically into the 1800s and tracks the voyage of both of a journey of both of these women's families to the United States and how that plays into their current day. And there's a mystery surrounding both families and a connection between the two women. They had planned to meet in the room before lunch and golf. She'd been ready for 15 minutes. Where the hell is Rob? Once again, she'd entered the waiting zone, a place doctors' wives frequent as often as patients frequent the waiting room. She wished she had scheduled her massage for today and not tomorrow. She hated wasting her time, but of course, as Rob continued to point out to her, the value of her time was somewhat questionable since she didn't work. The wife shift, he had called it. The hell with it. She wasn't waiting any longer. She dialed the spa on the hotel phone. Hi, this is Mrs. Wasserman in room 1014. I'm wondering if I can switch my massage scheduled for tomorrow for sometime today, preferably within the next hour or so. Yes, we have an opening in about 15 minutes. Can you make that? Perfect. Great. Just head to the 5th floor on the North Tower elevator and we'll see you shortly. Thank you. Screw it. He'd have to lunch and golf alone. All those lessons, for what? She was so tired of waiting that she decided to forgo leaving a note. Let him wonder for once where she was. Dina hurried into the spa elevator. Vaguely aware of another body standing next to her, she slowed her pace of chewing on the tasteless piece of gum she had popped into her mouth to eliminate the remains of the Bloody Mary tell. The candy treat had been included in the welcome bag given out to convention participants. After years of schlepping to meetings with Rob, this was her big prize, gum. She was aware of her breath slowing. She'd become adept at self-calming, putting her frustrations behind her. Rob's tardiness was just another minor skirmish in the war of their marriage, a war they both needed to win.
That's great. I can just see her in that room pacing and getting ready to make that spa appointment.
Yes, I've been there a number of times in my life. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I know that the book doesn't publish until next week, but have you met any challenges? Anything pre-publication? What have you been doing for publicity?
Well, I've actually decided to serve as my own publicist. I know that many people hire very talented marketing publicity staff, but this was something I wanted to try on my own, and I am learning many new skills. It's very challenging. And I think the thing that resonates with me is something that was said to me probably about 2 months ago, which is I think by one of my She Writes sisters. And she said, you just can't do everything. You can't do everything. You can make a list with very good intention, whether you have someone helping you, whether you do it on your own. And it's okay if you don't do everything. It's important to get your book out there. You want to get the message out there. You've worked so hard, and everyone, feels pushed in a way to do as much as they can. But there's a limit, and one of the reasons why I was able to write this book is because I have a life to draw upon, and that life pulls me. My children still pull me in wonderful ways, and my husband and I spend time and we travel, and so there are only so many hours in the day. I have some speaking engagements coming up that have been scheduled both in New Jersey and also in Florida, and I'm really looking forward to those, and have some interviews. And I'm hoping that people read about and become interested in this novel.
Well, I can just see you selling copies at all these medical conventions.
Well, I'm not sure they want the entire message out. Although I have to say, things have really changed. Even the title of this book, from what is politically correct to term a spouse. It's really a spouse, a convention spouse. We were all wives at my time, by and large. There were a few, certainly, men who came along with women physicians at that time. But for most of us, we were convention wives. I think that that the current reader population, whether younger or older, will find that even though there have been changes, certainly, in who is the spouse, who is the physician, a lot of what happens doesn't really matter. Who is the spouse, who is the physician. That dynamic can occur with anyone in which there's a couple and someone has a very demanding career. So I'm hoping that will resound in a more generic way.
Well, I'm sure it will. And I know you lived this life, but did you have to complete any research before you began or as you went along? Because you mentioned a historical aspect.
I did. And I love doing the research, probably to a fault. And I have been warned by many people who write historical novels that is a danger, that you can go down the Google rabbit hole and or at your library pull book after book and read and take notes and I enjoy that. And in fact, I find that it can change and drive my story as I go along. There's no question that things changed based on what I read about. But I think that there's a limit, and you have to sort of control that so that you don't lose the driving force of the plot and the character development.
I'm always interested in what writers edit out of the book. Was there anything that fell on the cutting room floor?
There was. As I mentioned, I had somewhat of a battle with my developmental editor about the percentage of history that was going to be in this book as opposed to the contemporary story. And I do have about 5 historical chapters that went by the wayside. One of them, in particular, I felt very bad about cutting because it gave the background of one of the husbands and in some way rounded out his character. And I think because there were many characters in this book, it was necessary to eliminate some of the background. But I think what was lost was the basis of his humanity, the basis of his struggles and the person he became. Because as we all know, in life and as writers, we certainly want to paint characters that are complex, multi-layered, and have reasons for why they act the way they do. So that was a chapter that I felt particularly not upset, but sad about losing, because I think it was a loss of character development, if nothing else. There were other historical chapters that went further back in time. I originally started in the 1600s, giving the background of these families. And that did take more research into, I don't want to give too much away, but into the European backgrounds of both of these women and the husbands. And I was guided to make the historical chapters a little bit more, not current, but move up the timeline a little bit to something closer to current day, that it was reaching a little too far back if I wanted to combine both a contemporary story and a historical story. So I did lose some of that.
Well, maybe you can use some of those eliminated chapters and write a prequel.
Maybe if it's wanted or warranted, I would certainly be open to that. I definitely, in my mind, saw those storylines continuing in different ways, but did not put it down on paper. But maybe I will have that chance. That's a great idea.
Do you think you have any unpublished or future books in you?
I do. I'm actually shopping around a book right now that I've completed. It's tentatively called Mahjong at Mara's. Very different book than The Convention of Wives, but an overriding theme of what happens when people from different backgrounds come together, and both the positive and negative aspects of the relationships that they form and the struggles that they have, and the importance of that happening in this world. So I'm looking forward to getting representation or finding a way of publishing Mahjong at Maris. And I started a third, and I'm working on that.
Well, Mahjong has become quite the popular game. They teach classes here in Texas, even.
Mahjong has traveled from, China all those years ago, all over the world. And a lot of people enjoy it. And it is a way for people to come together. So in this book, it's a way for a group of seniors to meet each other and get to know one another in a community. And yeah, it's a great game. I play it myself.
It's taken the place of bridge in a lot of places, I think.
Well, that's true. I think some people enjoy mahjong, some people bridge, some people play both. Then there's canasta. You could go on. I think it's great at a certain point in age. This is authors over 50 after all. I think to retain mental acuity and to socialize, these games become important. And I'm sure my children laugh when I tell them I'm off to a canasta game or a bridge game, but they'll get there. They'll understand it a little bit more when they're older. And I'm quite enjoying everything I play. So,
well, here in the little village settled by the Germans here in Texas, we play a lot of dominoes.
dominoes, that is something I have them in my basement, but I don't play them. So interesting. Okay. Maybe I'll pursue that.
What do you think was the best money you've ever spent as a writer?
I have to say, of the money I have spent, and I have spent, this is an industry, they say, where if you're looking to make money, you should walk out of the room. The best money I ever spent was signing up for a writing class. I have had the same teacher for quite a number of years. Her name is Michelle Cameron. She's an author herself and of historical novels. And that class did several things. It gave me skills I didn't have. I was a storyteller. I had written short stories. I had written in community papers, but I hadn't ever written a novel. I wrote a screenplay 25 years ago, but never a novel. And writing a novel it's a different animal, different thing. So that class gave me skills. It gave me community. It allowed me to reveal my inside crazy to people who I felt safe with doing so because they revealed themselves to me. And it also made me feel legitimate. When I had stopped working about 10 years ago, had to take care of a sick parent and had been winding up some consulting I was doing for 2 hospitals. And I decided to sign up for this class as something for myself, sort of keep myself sane. And I had started the novel and had an interest in doing something real with it. But this class gave me the ability, when I would meet people for the first time or be at a cocktail party and people would say, "What are you doing? What do you do?" And I couldn't talk about my hospital work anymore. I wasn't doing it. Uh, and it took me a while, but eventually I felt comfortable saying I'm a writer. And the more I went to class and the more the novel developed, uh, the more I felt that was true. It took a while, and it still is a funny thing, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So I think that is the best money I ever spent, taking that class. And I continue. I was going to sign up this fall again because it keeps me on track. Having to produce about 8 pages a week, it keeps me going. But there are too many things going on with the Convention of Wives. So I'm going to have to wait until next semester, but I'm looking forward to that.
Does your family support your career as a writer, especially your husband, since you're writing about his chosen career?
It's a very funny thing. He is exceedingly supportive. He always has been, with somewhat of a caveat. When I decided initially to go back to work, and we had the 3 children, and who still needed my time and energy. He said to me, that's really fine. I have to go back. He was also in school at that point, besides working, getting his MBA. And I think my going back to work was somewhat in reaction to that I finally needed to just do something for myself. And but he turned to me and he said, I think that's great. You should, absolutely do what you want to do. It's terrific. But I really have no additional time to take up any of the slack. So if that's okay, then go back, do what you would like to do. And so and this was when I was first going back to work. And I thought, okay. And I just did it. So he's always been supportive, maybe with a little bit of an asterisk because of his own demanding professional career. And then I would say that as far as the Convention of Wives, he's very supportive of the book coming out. But he does tell people he may have to leave town because certainly there are 2 surgeons in the book. There are 2 marriages in the book. And some of this does pull on our life. Most of it does not. Certainly the plot of it does not. But the everyday interaction does a little bit. And also in both negative and positive ways, I do reflect the actual struggles of marriage, but also the importance of getting through and finding your way to the other end of whatever those struggles are, and the benefits and the rewards of being able to do so. And so for that reason, maybe he'll stay in town, but he's a little concerned.
I hear that a lot from writers who are writing memoirs, so I understand that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm not sure how to do that. Everybody has so many stories about their families, their children, their in-laws, and I wonder how you tread that line. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it's difficult.
Well, and I understand what you're saying about dividing responsibilities and families and time, because young women today won't understand how it was several years ago when we were raising our children and trying to balance careers. And if the woman wanted to work outside the home, she still was responsible for children and for meals. And that has certainly changed today. I've watched my own daughters and their dynamics within their families, and the men have to step up, and it's 50-50. So I love to see that at least has changed in our lifetimes.
Well, I think it's changed to some degree. I'm really not sure it's 50-50. I just spoke with a woman who is younger than me. She's in her, I would say, early 50s and has a career. And we talked about the fact that even though her husband functionally has picked up certain things, she still feels like she's the glue. She, is looking down from 1,000 feet at everything that's going on, everyone's schedules and what has to be done, and carries sort of that angst with her. So it's an interesting conversation. And I'm sure if you get into the weeds, every marriage is different. Every parenting experience, every couple's experience is really different. But I have two daughters and a son, and all married, two COVID weddings, but all married in the last 3 years. And they are I can see there are no children yet, but they're all struggling with how they're going to balance all of that. And I'll be curious to see how it all works out.
Well, Deborah, our last interview question is always, our writers over 50 are such a unique set. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above?
My advice for them is to enjoy the ride. I think at this point in our lives, if something brings you stress, and this experience has, I'm not going to lie, has been somewhat stressful, but if you cannot reach the point where you can't sit back and smile and think about what you've accomplished and the friends you've made along the way, the relationships, and the pleasure that doing this has brought you, and the pleasure of writing continues to bring you, then I'm not sure what it's for. So I would hope that certainly writers of a certain age get pleasure from what they're doing, and just enjoy the ride.
I think that's great advice for all of us. We all need to enjoy the ride no matter what we do. And I call it writing in life's sweetest third. So I hope we can really enjoy the sweetest third of our lives. So thank you so much, Debra, for being with us today and offering your experiences. And we're happy to say that you're now one of our authors over 50.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.